There was something that we were talking about right before this that I thought was really interesting around this new kind of adoption that we're seeing, both from enterprises using Claude Code and a lot of these code gen tools for the first time in a real way. And then also on the consumer side, people making all new kinds of mediums that they haven't explored before. And it's really this sort of blurring between what a creator is versus what a user is. Do you feel like they are in some ways kind of the new kinds of consumers of a lot of these tools?
I think the lines between, especially with AI, because it's so indeterministic, but it allows a greater degree of freedom when it comes to what's possible. The lines between a consumer and a creator is definitely blurry. I think the way I see it and where the dissonance happens is AI. With AI, we keep saying creators, but actually, if you think of a live concert, when you go there, an audience kind of has a fair idea of what they're going to expect, but usually the reactions could be surprise, tears, or anger, whatever it may need to be. So the models are sort of surprising us every day like that. You have a fair idea of what it can give you, but I think ultimately the person using the model is more of a consumer of the model's capabilities. There's no rigid way to communicate what they can and cannot do. People are learning every day of like, how can I pull the best abilities from this model? But I think like we're going to enter in this very unique territory where you don't really know where the source of art is. It's just like out in the wilds and you don't even know where it came from. And then it mutates into so many different forms that it doesn't matter what the source is. It just matters how it gets consumed.
I'm curious, I mean, you have so much experience with live performance. Like, do you feel like using models as a kind of live performance every time?
I mean, yeah, it's such an interesting idea, what you're talking through. And I think I feel like I'm trying to place how I feel about that take. I think I feel complicated about it. I've spent a long time like building literal live concert shows by hand. Like I call it the old-fashioned way now, only because I feel like I lived so much at the front line of these like models. But I did the original origin of my work was all hand animating, 3D modeling, like rigging and lighting, and it would take thousands of hours. Like we would say animation is the most time consuming medium. You pay in blood, sweat, and tears, and it's really true. Now, probably for the last like 4.5 years, I've been like really immersed in video models. And with this thing I'm showing today, Sleepwalker, it's a real-time autoregressive model. And there's this really weird balance that I'm sure you all relate to, where you're sort of like relinquishing some degree of control with creativity in this sort of new era of tools. And at first, I think that can be like really terrifying in some ways, or it can almost feel like you're more consuming or watching this thing happen rather than participating actively within it. But I've started to sort of like have my philosophy shift into one that's more of like almost a sculptor when I use these tools, where it is like more of a dialogue between myself and the computer, myself and the model, myself and others, like especially for Sleepwalker, which is like literal multiplayer, where we are almost like having this really interesting push and pull for asking the model to go to these places. To some degree, I cannot control where it actually goes. Gopal, I know you witnessed that yourself when you demoed it. But there's something like really liberating in that when you start to embrace it. It feels very new vector, very new medium. There's this like pursuit of this thing that I think about all the time. We call it like the new image with a capital N and a capital I. It's like this idea that these models are going to allow me to produce things that no one's ever seen before, that are net new to humanity. And like this is one of the first times in like the entirety of existence that starts to really become possible. And so I feel less like a consumer and more like a creator when I use these models because of that, only because I'm in pursuit of that new image and I have almost no interest in replicating what has already come. But I recognize for sure that it is almost such a new set of motions overall to use these tools that it really requires like a radical shift in mental models to start to embrace. And even then I still feel like iffy sometimes.
There's even a thread here tying into some of your work, Brina, that is interesting around how a team might use this new kind of engine of creativity, of productivity, of work in a real way that allows them to some ways be maximally creative while also deepening their sense of individual taste. And a lot of that comes down to the interface, right, that we use, whether it's an in-person meeting, which is like the OG interface, a phone call, a Figma mock, a popcorn prototype. And I'm curious what principles you lean on as you think about designing that meta layer of how different creative people can collaborate with this ultra creative new engine that we all have access to.
Yeah, I mean, we think about it kind of a blank slate, but like we're really concentrated on the multiplayer level. So that's what makes me so excited about what you guys are building because I mean, I fully believe great minds together make great products, right? And so, as we kind of go into single player mode, everyone's going to be building their own thing and their own creativity. But to put a live concert on, you need hundreds of people to do that. And then it's just like the best thing you've ever felt, right?
Nice.
And so like that's how I feel when we're building out popcorn. And that's why we care about it so much because we know that if we can harness kind of what you guys are building and then put it in a more collaborative space, and then for all these minds to come from all different directions and then put it together, we can build really great products together. But right now, the tools that we have, it's all kind of hodgepodging that like collaborative space where, throwing into a messaging text thread, which doesn't quite get around the visual part that Figma used to give us, right? And then we have prototypes that are moving states and forms, and like, how do you verbalize around that? Like, and especially if you're 10 clicks in, you're just like, oh, I clicked on this, clicked on that, and then like, can you change that piece? Like, it's just so hard to describe, and that's what I see people struggling with, and so that's why popcorn is so exciting for me to work on. Where people can just take their single player mode of what they're building in their minds, push it out, and then everyone in their team can yes that. Yeah.
I think latent space is best explored together, and especially in the process of trying to actually physically realize things, whether you're building a prototype or you're trying to like literally go to a new dimension in a real-time model, or you're like building, some sort of piece of graphic design work. The best results that I've seen so far are the ones that are ultimately collaborative, and it's probably because it's literally such a net new vector to be within. It takes like the same way that we use multiple agents or like multiple inputs to produce an output. It takes multiple people, I think, to really like land somewhere compelling. I'm sure you see it all the time.
Yeah.
Working with like these kinds of tools.
I think the other thing I would add is just like we have to work with multiple humans with different skills. Even with an AI, there's a wide range of possibilities on what different models can bring to the table. Each has different personality. They might have different capabilities. And I think what's missing in the market today is everybody wants to one-shot everything. And it's possible maybe with code where everything compiles the same way and there's a verifiable path towards that. With creative, there's 3 things to satisfy. The creator has a certain expression of taste and they are trying to have the consumer consume it a certain way, and then the platform where it lives is going to influence how that gets consumed. And for all these variables to be right, the machine has to understand everything that you want to create. And I think that's a very big gap, and where I'm excited about new interaction patterns where we should move beyond simple text prompting. Like, it's not useful for somebody to write 3 paragraphs to maybe change the curvature of a font or change the background. And these are very simple tasks, which is why I think that is one part where a creator doesn't want to be surprised. They want to get the things done.
Mm-hmm.
There is a space where you would like to be surprised, amused, and be happy that the model is helping you explore realms that you didn't think was possible. So I think those are like 2 clear areas of research that you have to separate and like actually hill climb on, where you have to bring certain determinism in the process. And the way to do that is to teach the model, expose it to the right data, the same ways that a human should use to verbalize. So there's some way where you get work done in design versus there's a different space where you want to be in a space where it's like blue sky thinking. You want to see the art of possible, and then the models can help you do that. And I don't believe it's like one single model. It should be various models, agent harnesses, and then on top of that, interesting UI experiences that needs to keep evolving as the models kind of like create new forms. You should also have new tools to like steer the editing capabilities of it.
It's interesting because one of the things that is running through my mind is even in the room that we're in now, used to be one of our companies that started at SBC, this company called Goodfire, used to be their first office, right? And Goodfire builds tools to allow people building these models to interpret their models and understand what's going on and steer them in different ways. And I think an analogy that I've been playing with mentally that I've actually found quite helpful is to almost imagine latent space as a real kind of terrain, right? So there are spots of latent space where you want to strap on your scuba mask and go underwater. There's areas that feel like clouds. There's areas that feel like mountains. And the interfaces, the tools, the harnesses, even the other people who might want to chime in or bring in alongside our journey are different for each of these zones, right? So, as I'm building a bunch of agents for SBC, I'm like, when I am building, our agents to help us find new members and scour our members' networks and find interesting, talented people who might be exploring what's next, maybe the kind of harness I want that person or that agent to have is one that has on the hat of a recruiter or like a talent spotter. And then in other dimensions, when I want to scold members for leaving their mugs in the sink, I actually want like my mom's hat. I don't want this person to be like, oh, this could be an interesting engineer. I'm like, no, fuck it. Like I want somebody who's going to be like, get your fucking shit in the dishwasher, and it's like it's a silly example, but I think that a lot of creative work often straddles these boundary lines, right? Of like these amphibian territories where it's not actually obvious a priori what model you want to use, what kinds of harnesses you might want to use. And in some ways, one of the things that I want to touch on a little bit is how we can think about giving more of this intuitive feel to our models. And primarily the way to do that seems to be interesting and novel kinds of data. And I think some of the data work that you're exploring, I find pretty fascinating around making more legible this sort of overlapping zone of how humans operate and how models might intuit the world and understand the world. And I think it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so if you look at diffusion models, they were trained on billions of image caption pairs. But good design, let's say you look at an ad and they are a result of thousands of tiny design decisions. Those design traces probably live on Photoshop or Figma or any other tool that they're using. And when the model just has a surface level understanding of it, when it one-shots something, it's a cool demo to see on Twitter, but a world-class designer will not accept if it is even 1 pixel space away from the margin that they want. And if you are aiming for precision and you want AI to be a trusted, capable design partner, it has to also build an internal model of what does it mean to compose this layout? What does z-orders mean? What are the properties that you can mutate when it comes to text or image? And the way to do that is really teach the model with tons and tons of data of like good design practices, design traces. So we built the largest data set to demonstrate to the model like what are layered compositions, like what do each component's properties look like, what should you even change here? And because of that, you can build a model that is able to not just deconstruct any image it generates into layers, but you can also delegate each layer and let it evolve differently with different models or different humans, which is exactly how design works. Because design is not one-shotted, it's very iterative. You walk a few steps forward, few steps backward, and then maybe 1 step sideways. And this approach will allow for it, as opposed to current image models are like an engineer's or optimizer's stream where, oh, let me just get this done with 1 single prompt. But that is not how design actually works.
And leaning into the indeterminacy is an interesting decision.
So it's funny because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it, and it's like I really am living a double life right now. So like with Sleepwalker, it's almost like it is the full release of control, right? You like are only interfacing with prompts. You send that prompt out. It's autoregressive, which means the model is effectively like learning physics from first principles in every single session. It works the same way like a large language model would, where it's trying to like look at everything, every token that came before it, and then predict which one comes next. And so you get all these really interesting moments where you totally give up control. You basically tell it where you want it to go, and then it tries to solve the physics and the time to naturally get you there. And Gopal, you've seen it. It doesn't naturally get you there. In fact, it's very surreal and fantastical and bizarre. But the other half of my life, or like the biggest part of my life right now, I'm spending almost all of my time with like production teams. I'm working as a forward deployed creative at Lima Labs, and we just put out this agentic this brand new set of creative agents and this like big expansive canvas, and the entire game there is like the degree of control, and it's all about like as much context as possible, and you're working with huge sets of images and huge sets of text, and an agent that has an enormous amount of context, and really design in that moment or production or creativity becomes a conversation, an ongoing conversation, not just between yourself and an agent, but it's also multiplayer. So as many people as you can in this canvas are all working together. It's very interesting to kind of flip between the two, and as I think about it, I feel like Sleepwalker is almost like my like, it's like my fun sort of release on the other side of that, where you're right. Like the reality is that for the actual like enterprise applications and for like career creatives, what you really need is a conversation. You need a clear vision of creativity, and you need a ton of context. A text prompt is never enough, you know?
Yeah. It's so funny because when you guys are talking about creativity, and I come from the social world and talking about like, Instagram squared photos, then you make it a long photo and then you make it a video. And then, and it's so funny because so I think about creativity like expression, right? And so I'm kind of curious how the world is going to like figure out, as you think about these tools and where these models are going. And like reality is as a creative, you just want to be able to express yourself in a certain way. And it's funny as you talk about all the little knobs that you have to talk about. Those are the knobs that I care about to be able to express myself in that one way, and that's why I'm going to change that one pixel that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Can you say more about the new kinds of habits that both of you are seeing, maybe within the Popcorn interface, but then also your role at Luma is so fascinating, where you're working with people who maybe have never really used AI in that sense before. So you're also kind of you're both the tip of the spears in different domains. Can you say a little bit more about the new habits you're observing people like take on?
Yeah, the way that I think about things is just through expression, right? And so through PM, the tool is a doc and text, right? And for a designer, it's Figma. And so, but now we know that everyone's trying to express themselves through apps. And so now we need a place to be able to kind of be able to push up that app and then be able to have a conversation around it. So it's as simple as that, how I think about just what we're working on at Popcorn and how we see it moving.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. This forward deployed role has been just one where I feel like I get to really work with people who I think would be the most transformed by these tools, but sometimes are the most hesitant to do so. I'm in these rooms with VFX and post-production artists who have been doing this for 30 years, right? They've come up as computers have evolved. They've done everything by hand. And when I sit with them and I first show them, there was this great quote this guy said to me the other day. He was like, "When I talk to your agent, I feel like I'm dancing with the devil." And I was like, "Oh yeah, no one said that to me before." And I was like, okay, well, let's like start to think about it a little bit. And that's where like the experience of 10 years in production has been really helpful, because I know the blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to actually like make something real.
Yeah.
And I can kind of like hold their hands metaphorically and be like, okay, well, here's the places where I know this has been really difficult, or where I know this is really time consuming. And we really like focus on these sort of hybrid workflows where we're almost like bringing the agent along with you to start to pick up the pieces that are more frustrating or more time consuming. It's all about freeing up like cognitive capacity for the things that matter, right? Which is like the creativity, it's the expression, it's the exploration. And where previously a lot of like caloric thinking time was spent on setting files up, lighting, rendering, rigging, now it's iteration, right? It's in fact like the magic of this tool is the ability to see so many potentials simultaneously, and then the ability to explore those like very quickly. Into like, in a lot of ways, that's where we start to really see people shift, and they go from like, that guy who said it was dancing with the devil, he sort of is like, after a week he comes back and he's like, it's all about the hybrid workflow. Like, I love this agent. This agent is my new intern. This agent is my new friend. And I'm like, that's incredible that we got you there, and it's so exciting. And they almost in some ways like can't put the tools down after that.
I guess we've had this funny experience with enterprises that have large production spend. And what's interesting is over time, they kind of like don't verbalize a lot of tasks. They'll just be like, fix this. Like, what is this? Like, we don't know. And that even as a human, I'm not able to parse it well. But what's interesting is I've seen two types of creatives, like senior creatives. One, they're very excited by the technology. They want to see how to use it to explore everything. The second one is they want the machine to always obey. Like they don't want it to have a personality. They don't want it to bring any indeterminism to the process. And they are like, why can't it change the aspect ratio? That's all I wanted to do. Like it should just do everything I ask it. And I feel like that's where it would be interesting to see what new interface layers we can build, not necessarily humanize these models, but a way where people can get comfortable with the idea that you actually have a thought partner that is like your design teammate, because that's how you pitch it. But if it's like stuck in a small tiny box and you're like typing prompts or clicking buttons, I think their default state is, I just wanted to do whatever I ask it. I don't want to like spend time like trying to have it give me answers that I wasn't looking for.
That's such an interesting take. I definitely see similar things with some of the people that we're working with. In some ways, we also like have some of these senior artists like start to really they're reading every word back from the agent so closely, and they start to get really enamored in the relationship that they're having with the agent itself. But if there's any moment of sycophancy where there's a deviation from like what the agent has promised to do and what it's able to actually create, I think in a lot of ways that spell is like really broken for a lot of creatives. And so at Luma, like we've built a bunch of other additional sort of agentic tools. It's almost like you have an army inside our canvas. It's not just about the agent itself, but we actually have like a judgment layer that comes in and evaluates the outputs and then like gives the agent feedback on its own work and continues to iterate on it. And that plus like some framing of more of like, this is a collaborator, not a servant. This is somebody, this is something. I have to be so careful because it's like become so personified for me too. They're my friends, I really believe that. But it's really this like fine line you start to walk of like, really like out of creative behavior too, like where do you want people creatively to land with this? Do you want them to see it as like this executor, this like machine that just gives you your exact aspect ratio? Or like, are you more open and curious to these potential new pathways? Like to me, the second one really represents where creativity should go, what the evolution of creativity and like human computer collaboration could and should be,
And even that framing, right, of HCI to HCC in a way, right, of it is no longer just this tool that humans are using to express something they might have imagined a priori. It very much does feel like this dance, right? And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about as well, I mean, one of the first teams I was working with, these two founders, Sean and Max and Rob, or three founders, Sean, Max, and Rob. A lot of the stuff that they were exploring with WebSim was this really fascinating canvas of what is like a different kind of browsing experience maybe look like. And something that I noticed that was really interesting that I feel a lot now when I use a lot of computer use models in particular is this sort of shattering of the illusion, where when I see a model flail at navigating somebody's LinkedIn that I could navigate with my eyes closed, it's exactly that sort of illusion breaks where I'm like, oh, it's not really a person behind the screen. It's a robot that doesn't seem to know the world that well. And obviously this is a temporary feeling because in another week, these models are going to be so much better. So they're much better than I am at using some of these things. But the thrust of this being, in some ways, Brina, like something that you talked about a lot was this reliance on the conversation, whether written, dictated, or spoken in some ways and overheard, as the core medium of collaboration. And in some ways, like that carries with it a bunch of these externalities. The main API for us and other people tend to be conversation too. So it makes total sense that you get the same positive externality or negative externality of a relation forming. But I don't really build a relation. My life prior to investing was largely poetry. Like I don't really build that much of a relation with my pen and paper, though I am conversing, but I'm conversing through them rather than with them. And I wonder whether this is a temporary period of HCC that is so lingual that I wonder in 5 years from now, will we actually enter a period where it's much less conversational, actually much more non-verbal, in a way, like it's just watching us interact. You can imagine a popcorn interface where that sidebar is not a conversation, but it's actually just like a bunch of cameras pointing at us as we're just chatting, and it's kind of intuiting what we're doing. And there's no back and forth. Maybe it's just a one-way transfer of knowledge, and its conversation, its medium of conversing is just the thing itself. It's just the prototype that's continually shaping. So in some weird way, it's like we're chatting here and then, this agent that I'm building is just forming in front of me like some homunculus. And that's like not a crazy take in my opinion. But in that world, like I don't know whether I would have such a personal relation with the thing. Like I think it'd feel much more like this thing, this being that was being instantiated rather than me conversing with this new friend who is then making this thing, and we build an independent relation. And I think this is why my mind in some ways is so drawn to this idea of diffing the conversation with humans and then sending that to the model, because it feels like this really interesting three-body problem of like you, your collaborators, and this alien collaborator, which is permeating everything. This whole reason why you're on the surface. Otherwise, you would just stay on Figma. Like, if we didn't use these models, like Figma's great, or whatever, Google Docs is great. And so it's something that I've been thinking about a lot is like, what is the future kind of relation that we'll have with these models as they become maybe less verbal?
I think that's what we're teasing at Popcorn, right? I mean, we have a modality on Popcorn that you point and talk now. And we're going to push that even further as we figure out kind of just like what conversation is going to turn into. If it's text, pointing and collapsing maybe two modalities together. Maybe it's your eyes looking. Maybe it's just your mouth moving. Maybe it's the conversation between two people that Popcorn captures to actually build the prototype that you guys are thinking about. And so I don't know what's going to push, but I think in terms of how we think about, again, it comes back to expression for me. It's how your team expresses with each other, and then that combined expression is going to make a better product. And we need to build tools for that.
Can I give one hot take on this really quick?
Go for it.
Okay. When you write a poem with your pen and paper is not your friend, right? It becomes an extension of yourself. That's how I always felt about computer pre-AI era. And I think that's exactly the direction that we're going, right? I think it's going to shift from conversation to extension of self.
I have one hot take where I disagree with all of this, which is I think just like with humans, some people you have transactional relationships, some people are your friends, some people you absolutely hate, you never want to see them again. I think with AI, like they would also be a different type of beings. Maybe with some AI, you don't want to interface with them and they just watch you get things done and you never want to see them again. Whereas with some AI, you might want to nurture your relationships and they are an extension of your mind or like active collaborators. So I actually don't think it will be this or that.
Yeah.
We will harvest AI people, I guess.
Well, I mean, I feel that personally. Like I was writing a poem 2 weeks ago, and one of my favorite teachers is poet Louise Glick. And, I was writing this poem and I was like, I basically sent it to Claude. I was like, hey, like pretend you're Louise Glick and give me feedback. And it was so interesting. I mean, I had that thread going and then a bunch of other random SPC threads of like, can you do all this random work for me? And I felt an emotional relation when I closed that thread and my poem was done. And I was like, oh, damn, like, and she has since passed away. So it did feel like this weird reanimation of this. And the feedback was actually great. It was exactly what I think I could imagine her saying in the same kind of stern voice. And so there is going to be a heterogeneity, right? It's like even within the same interface, different threads can totally have different kinds of characters. Well, I appreciate all of you guys joining us today from different corners of the SPC universe. I think that the broader threads around creativity, human-computer collaboration, and what it might mean to be a creative are all ones that folks are really interested in exploring. And so I appreciate that you guys came here to sort of share your thoughts with us today.